Oh, hello, everyone, and welcome to the 40th episode of Stories of Service, ordinary people who do extraordinary work. And I am the host of Stories of Service, Teresa Carpenter. And I have probably one of my favorite people on the show today. I'm so excited to have Mohawk Matt Denny. Matt, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I am doing amazing. Thank you so much for being on the show. I'm going to go ahead and read a little bit about Matt's bio, and then we're just going to get right into some questions. So, this is Matt, as you see here. He gets shit done. He sees the world like a battleship game, and he makes his moves while others are just still planning. He brings teams together and removes barriers so they can focus on what they do best. He sees the calm during the chaos and enjoys problem solving at 200 miles per hour, like his recent partnership with NASCAR driver Colin Garrett. Glorious Mohawk and the Be Awesome logo flying down the racetrack. Just picture that at Darlington Speedway to help bring resources to veterans and their families nationwide. You can check out his resume to see what he's done over the years. Simply put, he'll solve your problems because he's got 20 years, you guys, of experience solving problems across many domains, both in the private sector and the federal government, with an emphasis on the knowledge of innovation and acquisitions in the Navy, Marine Corps, and other Department of Defense agencies. He sometimes feels like Big Bird walking through a hallway of stormtroopers most of the time, but it's because he does things differently and it's how he's made. And he can help you and your organization stand out in a sea of stormtroopers. He's a strategist and mentor, understands how people and cultures work, communicate, and operate. His work has allowed him to engage with many different cultures and nuances of communication worldwide, including those found within military organizations like the armed forces and federal government. And with this knowledge, it's easy for him to build strong relationships both locally and internationally. These relationships help him have conversations you wouldn't have otherwise in traditional methods or innovative practices alike. This skill set also helps him navigate interdepartmentally, removing silos in large and small organizations. And you know what? He could start using a ton of buzzwords and say this or that, or you could just give him a call, folks. And this is also for the audio. You can call him at 801 472 8021, and it's his actual number. Welcome, Matt.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
So good to have you. I'm just so honored to have this conversation with you. You've been a mentor to me in the broadcasting and podcast world, and you helped me when I was getting started. And I had a million questions, and I was going back and forth with you and Jose and you guys. Velasquez, you guys were just both so helpful. And so I want to thank you so much for everything you did to help me get my podcast started.
You're welcome. When I started all the stuff that I started for podcasting, recording, broadcasting, there was nobody, and so now I help everybody that I can because I didn't know anyone that did it. And so
Yeah,
hopefully it helped.
it helped tremendously. Honestly, you guys were the big reason I went with StreamYard, among other issues, and just anything I've had you about camera angles, this and that. You've just been so amazing. But want to get into your story, and we've got Catherine, who's on the show, and Catherine Mapp
Hey,
says, "Go
Catherine.
Matt." But first off, I just want to ask where you're from, and sort of a little bit about your childhood and growing up, and then how that led to joining the Marine Corps.
Yeah, so I grew up in northern Utah, a town called Layton. It's about 20 minutes north of Salt Lake City, where most people know Salt Lake. And I had in the outside eyes, I probably had a regular childhood where I had both parents. I had everything I needed growing up. But on the inside, I was a ball full of crazy. Mostly it was in the late 80s, early 90s, still understanding what ADHD was. And for me, it was very different than others in the sense that I was very fortunate to have a mom who was a resource teacher. And so I was kind of like a guinea pig when they were doing a lot of testing and different things for the early days of what ADHD or ADD is. Now it's called neurodivergent. Um, and so I got to do like a lot of fun tests. So I never actually saw it as something bad. But
Yeah.
I still had all the unknowns going on in my head because with that came my dyslexia. With that came some other things that I processed differently. And for a long time, it was pretty negative in my headspace. And growing up as a kid, especially always like most kids and most adults, wanting to like please other people, be like other people, and I could not. I could not. There is no way on planet Earth that I can be like anyone else, both the way I think and in general, and I'll talk to more of that later. But so I always just kind of bounced around. I graduated high school with people who know me now probably think, oh yeah, everything just like I graduated high school as a 1.4 GPA. Like I barely graduated high school.
Wow. So how did ADD manifest itself? Like, give me some examples of what you would do that was different than some of the other kids.
Well, some of the typical ways that people know it as now is I couldn't hold still, I couldn't pay attention, and what I know now that I didn't know then is it's not that I'm not paying attention, it's that I'm paying attention to everything, and so I could hear. I remember specifically as an elementary kid, being able to hear like the toilet flush down the hall and people's conversations in other classrooms, and so it's not. People always joke it's like super hearing, and I tell kids that now, but it's just that you're paying attention to everything. We hear so much in the world, but most people just kind of can focus. But folks that are neurodivergent really don't. It's you hear everything, you see everything, and so it never made sense. It was really hard for me to focus in school. Reading was very difficult, mostly because I couldn't pay attention to like retain what I was actually reading. I can read a whole book and I couldn't tell you one thing it said.
I do the same thing. I read books all the time and then can only tell you like these very big highlights of the book. I can't get drill into the details. It's one of the reasons why even my writing isn't very detailed. It's very to the point because I just can't deepen into details easily. It's very hard for me to do that. And I've always struggled with being detail oriented. And I would get in a lot of trouble and it would be hard in the Navy because of that, not being good with details. And I felt a lot of shame about it, to be honest. And you really inspired me to see ADD totally differently and not necessarily just to see it as a different way of thinking, not even as a disorder, not even as a label, but just a different way of visualizing the world. And it sounds like you had a mom that really put you on a path that helped you with that.
Yeah, she did. She was able to. At the time, I thought it was weird. I was just a kid. I just wanted to go play outside because we still played out. We still played outside then.
Right.
Yeah. And so, but later I learned like as I took all these tests and learned, and I did a lot of the different things that parents do with ADD or ADHD kids. And it was when I was 13 and I had a doctor who said, all right, Matt, we're going to take you off of everything that you've ever tried, and I'm just going to teach you. And he taught me. He pulled out this big poster. I was in his doctor's office, big poster. They had like all these artists like Leonardo da Vinci, Michael Jordan, very successful people, all done the thing. And he's like, they didn't classify it the way we do, but they think the way that you do. And they thought the way that you do. And so when I started to get a mental shift of like, oh, it's just a different way of thinking, and look at all these extremely successful people that think this way, it really changed everything for me. And I still struggle through the high school years because all kids do as you're coming into age and all the things. But then I couple that with something my friend told me when I was 17. He had this ability to just like be himself 100%, which is what people know me as now, but it wasn't me growing up. And I was like, how do you just like talk to everybody the way you do? And he's like, I don't care. Like, it's just a dude. Like, and it was my buddy Marcus, and I talk about him a lot online and still friends to this day. But that coupled with now I have this superpower in my brain, it just completely unleashed me. And the first step of that was actually dropping out of college. I went to go to college, like that's what you're supposed to do. I was there for 3 days. And I was like, this isn't going to work. This is too slow. This is high school all over again. I got through high school because I paid my little brothers to do my homework for me, or my mom did my homework for me, which I'm not ashamed of because I wouldn't be here today. Like I did that structure of things. My brain cannot follow that. So 3 days into college, I was like, I'm out. And I was able to get like half or enough of my tuition back because it was early enough that I bought all the books that I was interested in. So at the time, I was going into graphic design. And so I just dropped out and because it was too slow for me. And I was like, why do we have to do all this math and English? And I just want to learn design. And
Right.
so I dropped out, got the books, and taught myself, and kind of like most graphic designers, started making business cards and things for other people, all while I was doing other jobs. This is, I think, in the Marine Corps, which I'll talk to in a minute, is the only time I ever had one job at a time. I've always had multiple things going on as a kid or growing up through my 18 through 23-ish. There's one point I was a truck driver, a DJ, and a bouncer all at the same time. And that was fantastic. And I just found a way to, I functioned better doing multiple things and experimenting with different things. And so that's how it started. After high school, I dropped out. College, started learning my own skills. And then at the time I was cleaning sewers. Then I did fence building. Then I did driving. Then I did promotions. So this all, and I say this part because it leads into now a lot of people know me in the marketing and branding space, which I didn't realize I was doing back then, but I really was. As I got into concert promoting, party promoting, event promoting, and that's actually how I fell into my job in the Marine Corps, which became combat correspondent for the Marine Corps, or public affairs, combat camera type photojournalism. Is the recruiter was like, oh, this is kind of like what you're doing, like promoting things and talking to people. And I was like, and recruiters never lie. So obviously, but then I get to the schoolhouse, and after boot camp and everything, for which we know as DINFO's, Defense Information School, and the lady, this instructor says, okay, the first 3 weeks is going to be writing. And I'm like, I literally put my hand up and I said, I don't think what? I don't write. Like, I didn't know this was writing at all. And so I thought it was like talking to people, which I later learned it is. But I found this new passion for writing that I didn't even know I had, because I'd only ever written in the school way, English papers, reports, white papers. And so it was that way doesn't work with me. But storytelling, that's my jam. And so I fell deep into that, and I'll pause there.
Wow, that's incredible. It was almost like, when as I was listening to you, I was thinking like it's almost like you're sort of on this wave, and like the wind and the waves are just kind of, and you're allowing yourself to ride it, where a lot of people will limit themselves and say, oh no, I can't try that, or I can't do that. You just kind of work through life, and does this interest me? So I'm gonna try that, or I'm gonna go for that. And I just find that so fascinating that you were able to just sort of get into something in the Marine Corps that you already had a skill for, which I didn't do that. I went into the recruiting station and I said, I don't know what I want to do. I don't know who I am. Help me. And they said, okay, we're going to have you fix airplanes. And that wasn't anything like what I should be doing in my time in my life. But I just didn't have that self-awareness. And I also didn't have any sense of someone is never, I wasn't there yet. I wasn't at that place.
So when I joined the Marine Corps at 23, and so, which is older than most. So I had a number of jobs in life, different living on my own.
Okay,
so
I was 19. Okay.
Yeah, when I went into the military, I interviewed all of them. I made appointments with the Navy, the Marine Corps, the Army, the Coast Guard, the Air Force, because I wanted to know what I was getting into. I didn't need to join. I wanted to join. And so it was more of which is the best path. The main reason I'm not in the Navy, they never showed up to the appointment.
Yeah, your story is interesting. You did the research. You did. Oh wow! And my buddy Marcus Stanley, I believe he's either an MC1 or a chief. And if I got that wrong, Marcus, I'm sorry. But he says, hold on a second. Well, first he laughs about what you said about the writing thing, because he knows that happens a lot. And he says, I hear that a lot from my students today at the Defense Information School. Yeah. I mean, a lot of people don't know that a lot of what an MC is going to be expected to do, that's in the Navy, mass communication specialist, it is going to be, initially anyway, a lot of writing. But we all have a skill set. Even in communications, we have those ones that love to do graphic design. We got the ones that like to do the broadcasting, and we got the one, MC1. Okay. We have people that like to do everything, and then some people that only want to do one thing and they want to deepen into that one thing. And were you one of those one thing kind of people, or did you go, okay, no, that's what's so amazing about you, Matt. You just said, okay, I'll try that. And then you did, and then you were good at it. And that's really special.
So it ties to the neurodivergent ADHD brain of I can do one thing for about small amounts of time. Sometimes that's like a couple hours, sometimes that's a couple months, but I'm always going to jump to something else. And it's not a lot of people, and it's actually a struggle. A lot of people see that as negative, especially companies and businesses. Like, why were you only here for so long? Why were you only here for so long? And it's only been it's only recently been the last few years where people are starting to see value in that and not the negative side of that. Because like when I was growing up, it was you became a doctor, you did this, you're an engineer, you did this forever, you did one thing forever, and now you're starting to see the value, or people are recognizing the value of the T-shaped people versus just, so you have one, like, so I have one thing I'm really good at, but then I have a bajillion things I'm decent at.
Right.
And for me, that's what I always enjoyed. And that's what I did in the Marine Corps. I always did I did the whole photojournalism thing, but then I was our newspaper designer for a bit. I was this for a bit. I was that for a bit. I jumped around to the different things inside the job that we had. And then I just found ways to put myself in different situations and get the most out of it. Like I do today, one of the stories my wife loves is the first person I ever interviewed, like professionally or like officially, besides the recruiters, like for an actual story, was the Commandant of the Marine Corps. And it was before I had gone to DINFOS. So I had landed at DINFOS, and then some Marine sergeant walks in like my third day there, and I was a Marine awaiting training because back then for the Marine Corps it was like 2-3 months before you picked up class sometimes. And so, and I hear they fixed it finally. This sergeant walks in, he's like, I need 3 Marines. And I raised my hand thinking I was going to clean a toilet. He's like, all right, you 3 are going to the Pentagon for a couple months. I was like, oh, fresh out of boot camp, no clue left or right what's going on. And so I got to go to the Pentagon and spend time with Marine Public Affairs folks there. And this corporal was taking me down. He's like, hey, come with me. We're going to go interview someone. I was like, okay. Hi, corporal. I don't know what to do. So we went, and we're starting to walk, and we're starting to get to like the nicer part of the Pentagon, which is like where like there's carpet and like wood. I was like, where are we going? He's like, we're going to do an interview, and you're asking the first question. I was like, okay, what's it about? And so it's his story. But then we go in and we walk into the commandant's office. Remember, brand new, fresh out of boot camp. I'm like, I know the guy's name because I had to memorize it 3 months ago. But I'm just like completely overwhelmed. I'm like, okay, here we go. He's like, all right, go ahead. And he introduced me and stuff, and we talked. But then he's like, you're asked the first question. My question was, why are you still in? Why are you still like, why didn't you get out? And the corporal like kind of hit me. And he asked me later, he's like, why'd you ask that question? You said I could ask whatever I wanted. That's what
How
I
did the
wanted
commandant
to know.
take it? Did he like the question?
He
did.
loved it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great question.
Because it was raw and just like, but what I didn't know what was happening was that was setting me up for success. That everyone I ever had to interview after that was like, okay, who you are? This is easy. I interviewed the freaking Commandant of the Marine Corps.
What an amazing person he was to bring you in on a meeting like that. I can remember, she's now retired, but Colonel Dee Dee Hatfield did something like that for me at Paycom. She brought me in for the 4-star for the media preps, and she would hand me the prep packet and say, all right, you're gonna brief Admiral Locklear. And I'm like, I'm gonna brief Admiral Locklear and tell us for this media engagement? What? And she would sit there and watch me brief him. And he knew, like she would tell the front office ahead of time, hey, I'm bringing Lieutenant Donnelly upstairs with me, and I want to give her experience briefing the boss and doing a media prep for the boss. And yeah, those kinds of stories just stick with you, don't they?
They do. It's the right leaders at the right time. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. And then back to your ADD stuff, Vicky Lynn Hindred says, this is how most who work in the EMS arena are wired differently, but not less successful. That's interesting. I mean, they're constantly, those guys, those paramedics, they're constantly dealing with things coming from every direction. And my mother was a paramedic, and the stories she used to share with me are just heartbreaking and all over the map.
And I love that piece because it's a lot of people think that it's multitasking, but multitasking actually doesn't work. I call it more multi-thinking, and it's you're able to, like, you still can only do one thing at a time, but you're able to kind of see things differently. It's that chaos that you read from my bio. It's very common if you understand how to use your ADD and ADHD to your advantage. And I say that because it is such a negative connotation for the last 50 years that people think that it's bad and they're wrong people, they're horrible people. But if you understand that it's not, and that you can use that chaos to your advantage, you can actually, like EMS, you can see clarity where most people are freaking out, they don't know what to do. That's probably what she sees when she's doing her job. It just makes sense because you can see so many things going on, because you can hear things in your brain's paying attention to things. Again, it's not super hearing. That's what I tell kids when I coach little kids, but it's just being able to, like, actually pay attention to it, and it allows your brain to feel. I call it kind of the Sherlock effect from Sherlock Holmes. Like, you can kind of see things differently than most people, and not quite to the eidetic memory side, but to the, just like, you can recognize what's going on multiple times. I can be in a restaurant and tell you all 10 conversations that are going on and pieces of those conversations. That's actually one thing my mom did, a test that I did when I was a little kid, I talked to earlier, was they put me in a room and they had me play a video game, watch a movie, and have a conversation with someone. And the results I found out later was neurotypical is now what people call it, like people without ADD or ADHD or different brain functionality could only do one thing at a time. They could be okay, and maybe, like, but it's because that whole multitasking thing, like, they couldn't do very well. Where I and other kids, neurodivergent with ADD and ADHD, I could watch the movie, tell you exactly what's going on. I could have a full conversation, and I can play a video game and get pretty far. And so it's just because you can process quickly and bounce, because your brain already does bounce. And so when you give yourself multiple things to bounce, and again, that can go negative too, when, like, if you're in, like, a school setting, when they only allow you to do one thing at a time. Like, for me, the best way to read a book is I usually read 2 or 3 at a time. And so I have a couple of books that I'll open, read a little bit, and then I'll get bored, so I'll jump into another one or read a little bit, because that's how my brain prefers to bounce. So I let it bounce.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. And, I think ADD shows up differently for different people too, because my husband, I think, also has some ADD in him. And he's like you, like, he can multitask and perception, whereas I can't. I have to really, really discipline myself to just concentrate on one thing and just stick with it. But I, like you, I read like 3 books at a time. But I also feel like one of my superpowers is I have a very keen sense of feeling and feeling people, feeling a room, getting vibes, because I was bullied. So I think I'm just very super sensitive. And so I can sense when, like, I'm having a bad vibe from somebody, or I'm feeling something. And then, and typically now I follow my gut, because I'm usually pretty spot on with what I see. And I've seen things in people before I know other people are seeing it. So I consider that to be a pretty good quality. And so, like you, I've learned to just embrace the pieces of me that are different, and that, we can use. Now, I want to get back to MC1 Stanley. You got another question about Dimphos, and he says, give me one second here. He says, Matt, what advice would you give my students who are currently going through the basic mass communications course at Dimphos?
So my advice, I'll give my advice, and I'll give you something else that I might be talking to your students soon. I haven't shared that with many people yet. But my advice would be to just try to learn everything and try to find what works, and then ask your instructors like, hey, how can I learn more about this? The best thing that made me better at my job in the Marine Corps is in this world, in this DINFOS type space, is learning outside of the DINFOS space, learning outside. So the things, as I dove more into photography and design, I would go after class or after I went back into the fleet after school, I'd teach myself other ways because DINFOS is one way. And if you're like me, I can't do things one way. And so I would learn from other ways. I'd read articles. I'd try different photography techniques. I already had a design background, so I knew things that way. But I'd go and find different fields to learn from, and that I'll talk to later as well to my entrepreneur journey. But it's a super. I didn't realize I was doing it at the time, but learning from people that do things not like you. So if you're a DINFO student, you're a military photographer, well, don't go learn from just military photographers. Go learn from National Geographic. Go learn from sports photographers. Go learn from wedding photographers. Watch what they're doing. Same thing with design and video and broadcasting. Like, try to find things that you can relate to, but completely different than what you're around every day, because that's going to give you different ideas, different ways to think. One of the common ones I say when I'm working with teams and organizations is if you're trying to figure out this process of like, there was an organization I was working with last fall, and they were planning out, I was helping them plan out what space combat looked like in 2040. And they were like military. And I proposed to the group, I said, what do you think Oreo, the company Nabisco, is doing in 2040 to get their Oreos in your mouth? Like, what is their process in 30 years, 20 years? What is Amazon doing? What are people, they take completely out of your normal and try to find something and then apply it to what you're doing.
I like that. Yeah. I think that sometimes we tend to just surround ourselves with people who think and act and look and talk like us. And I think that's unfortunate. And that's one of the reasons why, other than the inclusion aspect of it, I think diversity is so important in organizations, because you have to have those people that come at things differently and see a problem differently. Because if everybody sees the problem the same way, groupthink is going to come in, and there's going to be tragic results because no one's going to see anything differently.
Also, MC1, if you're still there, I just got I helped my friend get a job at DINFOS. Her name's Margot Allen. So she's a new instructor there. So hook her up.
And then Vicky said a couple things about service. She says, I was not in the service, but I wish I had. I attribute having worked at EMS as a form of combat. You always have to be prepared for what is thrown at you. You have to be prepared to be hit or swung at. You have to be a social worker and to be able to handle the post-traumatic stress issues that are going to hit you when you least expect it. It was the best field for learning empathy and truly seeing life and people in a different way. Wow, that's deep. I agree.
It's wonderful.
And it reminds me of what I was talking to you about before the before the podcast. There's a show called Soft White Underbelly. It's on YouTube. I highly recommend it. A guy named Mark Latta who does it. He used to be a photographer for Nike, and he takes gorgeous pictures, but it's his interviews that are so captivating. And he interviews constantly, like done like 4,000 of these shows, over 1 million subscribers. And he gets the people from like the drudges of the earth or whatever, the people, the untouchables, prostitutes, drug addicts, homeless people, and it humanizes them, because you really see what it was that led to some of these issues. It's sad. It's very sad to watch, but it's also very, very illuminating. And you see a lot, and it restores my humanity and my empathy for people, because you see so much. And so your post, Vicky, reminded me of that. All right. So getting back to your story, what ended up happening towards the end of your Marine Corps career? Did you decide, did you always know you wanted to get out, or was there sort of something that happened, or how did you decide that it was time to go?
I didn't decide anything.
Okay.
Which I don't think any of us do. We either take action or we don't. But for me, for my wife and I, it was like 20-year plan. We're going to stay in for the Marine Corps. I loved the service side and I loved the job side. But I had my own Marine Corps experiences that ended me up in Wounded Warrior Battalion in San Diego just a couple years in. And so I spent, after school, I got to go to Okinawa, and I was there for 2 years. and some things occurred when I was overseas that took me to different experiences. And as that happened, it was really hard and really negative for me because this is like what I had planned. This is what I wanted to do
Mhm.
forever, and or at least at the time in my mind. And so it didn't. So compounded with the actual health issues I was having and the things that were occurring, with also the mental side of like I'm failing. This is
Right.
like my path, and I can't go down it now. It was really, really hard, and I had some very it's different stories for different times, but very depressive times in the Wounded Warrior Battalion. And it wasn't until this one moment that it all changed for me. And it didn't really even come into play until years later. But I was talking to this Marine, and this is kind of the defining moment of what I do now is because of what happened back then. And it was we were chatting, and we were kind of both in Wounded Warrior Battalion. How it works is you kind of just focus on healing, and so you live in these like dorm barracks type things, but you're always at your appointments. And so I was just with a buddy. We're chatting about his story about him getting blown up in Afghanistan, and we get done, and he gets to talking, and he's like, "Why the?" And he's using different words than I'm going to use here. He says, why did I tell you any of this? Like we've known each other for like 3 weeks, and so we got nothing to do. And so I was like thinking about it. I was like, well, because I'm here. So why am I here? So the things that happened to me. So that gave me the comparison. Okay, you must have similar things like me because you're here in this hospital. And we're both Marines, so you know that anyone that served knows that veteran like feeling that comes in and when you find another vet. And so that, and then compounded with um, my ability to talk to people and pull information out as an interviewer and as someone that can have conversation and an extreme extrovert, all compounded into me realizing that everything that had gone through and went through, both positively and negative up to that point, was to give me the ability to give somebody else a microphone and help them either find themselves, share their story, because of what I was trained to do, because of my natural skills, and then my extrovertism, and then all the things that put me into the military. And so for me, everything changed in that moment. Everything. I mean, I still have my own struggles, but everything got simpler because I
Mhm.
stopped focusing on my problems and I started
Reframe
focusing
it.
on why it happened
Mhm.
and what I can do for others, which speaks in that, and that helped and it did things, but I didn't really fall into that until 8 years later, where I actually jumped back in because after that I got a job in as a Navy PAO out in China Lake, which is Navy base in the desert. Still don't understand that one. But so I just kind of fell into the work things, life things. My wife's with me finally. One of the unique things, so as this is a story of service podcast, my wife and I never actually, we were friends for years, but we didn't start dating until I got back from boot camp on my like chunk of leave, my 10 days of leave, because she couldn't resist the Marine Corps uniform, obviously. But we never dated in person. It was all virtual. We were friends, so we had something to build off of, but
Mhm.
it was all on the phone because this was before Skype. This was before video was big. And so it was
Mhm.
phone, then Gmail video, and then I proposed um, over Skype, and then and then I got married. I flew in 3 days before the wedding. I left 28 days after the wedding, and then we didn't live together for the first year and a half of our marriage, which I know service members can relate to, because that's just part of the life that you kind of have. And so we have that unique relation. Like now we've been together 12 years, but it's something that a lot of people don't understand comes with the military life.
Oh yeah. And so when you went to China Lake, were you going there as a civilian, or was that still while you were in the military? No, civilian job.
Civilian, yeah. So I
Honestly,
forgot to
wow.
mention that. I ended up getting military medically retired. And
Mhm.
so I medically retired out of the Marine Corps and then went as a civilian job up to the Navy.
Wow. So I didn't know that you started as a PAO, as a civilian PAO, and then because I knew you went to when I met you, you were in DC and you were doing like the stuff for the sec nav of acquisitions. I forget what it's called. but you were there. And so did you go from China Lake to the DC job, or was there a lot of other things in between?
So physically, yes, I went from like China Lake to the DC thing. When I was in DC, I was actually still home command to China Lake. But job wise, no. I was a PAO for about a year, and then there was an opportunity. We were redoing the command website, and I'd done graphics and some web design, tampered with it, played with it. So there was a chance for me to jump into the web design team. So I went and did that. And then I did fell really in love with UX UI. So I was a UX designer and researcher for a bit. Then I started doing organizational transformation. I was a tech expert for Jira, Confluence, Chat, a bunch of other tools, rolling out software to NAVAIR, the command I was attached to. And then it all pulled me back into the human, or not back into like the agile world, human-centered design world, which eventually got the attention of what is now Naval X.
Naval X, that's what I couldn't remember the name. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, to go out there, and that's so I didn't go to Naval X. You know me and most people know me in my role at Naval X as Mohawk Matt, as the PAO type media guy, but that's not why I went. I went to do digital transformation because that's what I was doing at the time. And when I got there was a hole, and I kept raising my hand like, this is wrong. We can't do that. That's against the policy because of my DINFOs and my PAO brain. And so it just kind of fell into that again. So I never thought I was going back into the media stuff again. Like I had gone a different path. And so it pulled into that. And I was just like, all right, let's try this. And just kind of jumped into it. And then I'll pause there because the Mohawk Matt story is different.
No, I know, but I think what's so amazing about your story, another thing that I'm hearing, is that you show, especially in the PAO community, we seem to think that people can't be a strategist and a tactician, and I completely reject that. Like as an officer, I reject that we're not both. And here's what I mean by that. I believe that the best strategists know the tactics, know how to play with the tools. They have the skills. They're not just somebody that gets to sit in front of the boss and tell the boss how they should look and act on camera. Like, I just don't think that. And again, that makes me unique, I think, in my community, because there's so much of an emphasis right now on not being a tactician. You're a strategist. You write communication plans. But Matt, what your story tells me, and it reaffirms for me, is that you are a strategist. You know how to be strategic. You know how to have a vision. You have that visionary mindset, but damn, you know how to do graphic design. You know how to edit a video. Would you say that's true?
Oh yeah. And I say that's really your point. I think that's heavy in the officer versus enlisted. Like you see that separation where like officers are supposed to be strategists and planning and strategic planning and all the comm stuff.
Exactly.
Where you see enlisted should just stay like tacticians and only doing that.
Stay down here. Yes. And I disagree with that.
If your MC1 is still there, I'm going to add on some of your initial question. If you have DINFO students, encourage them to make friends, like appropriately, but make professional relationships with the officers to understand how they do what they do, because that's where I think DINFOS fails, is they train you to be a tactician or they train you to be a strategist. They don't train you to do both. And it's either skill-based. Like I remember having an officer when I was in Thailand on an exercise. He's like, "Yo, Matt, can I get one of your extra cameras? I'm going to go around and shoot." I was like, "No disrespect, sir, but like, you know how to do that?" Because like he's never, it's not included in their job, and they're not allowed
for us to do that. Like people, like the other day we did a piece for CBS News, and it's like been the one thing that I've talked about with being at UCOM, and it's about security assistance with the Russia-Ukraine thing. But the biggest thing that I was so happy about was that I helped set up the room, and I was able to use my podcast skills for something that was unrelated, to my podcasting, but it helped my job. And it just goes back to the fact that I know that if I geek out, I think, on the stuff that I like doing, which are some of the tactics, but then I'm also a long-term strategist, I'm more valuable to the organization because I'm not just offering one thing.
Well, and I'm going to pull that thread just a little bit. Is I for many years was told, like, Matt, you don't do strategy. You're not good at it. Like, you're horrible, blah, blah, blah. That's because it was my wife that realized this. Most people are in the DOD space, and a lot of people in general do the strategy, and they kind of live their life like playing the game Risk, where they plan, set this up. By the time they actually go to like take over this country in the board game, they can't go over here to take another country because it's too hard. And that's how a lot of people do their life. Like, well, I've already committed to this in college. I've already put 10 years in. I can't change now. Where I'm playing, my strategy is more battleship, which you spoke to in my bio. And that's where this comes from. Is I'm playing battleship. Just point me to let me know. And my strategy is to start. My strategy is to start
Just do
before
it.
anyone else does,
Yep,
and
just
just
do it.
fire and see. Okay,
And
if I
see where
hit,
it takes you.
I'm going to pivot. If I miss, I'm going to pivot and just
Oh,
see
that's
where that
beautiful.
goes. And that helps me build the longer term strategies. But it's for a long time, people told me, you're not strategic. You're not, because strategic to them was a 55-page plan.
Right.
This
Which nobody
document.
reads. Yes.
Yeah. And I'm never going to write anything that I won't read. I will
Yeah.
never
Well,
make anyone do anything I won't do.
when I first started coming up in the accreditation and PR, we'd have people that, and I know you guys you are communicators. I'm kind of geeking out on the communication side, but a plan. When they would say we needed to have a plan, it, like you said, Matt, it had to be this 30-page communications plan. Even these things that we have called public affairs guidance, they're 15 pages long, when like they could be 3 pages of just key messages and hard questions that we anticipate the media might ask us. Of course, we're not going to think of all of them, but some of them, the main ones. And then what are some of the main messaging points? What are the 3 main points that we need to put out to the media? But a lot of times, I think, like you say, we get so boggled down in our plans and our meetings and our what we call OPTs out here, operational planning teams. And we put together these 40, 50-page slides, and they call them in the operation world ConOps, concept of operations. And really, like you said, life is about getting kind of an idea of the road that you're going to be on, having an end state, going, okay, this is where I kind of want to end up. But then knowing, like you said, shit, things are going to change. And what am I going to do when something changes? How am I going to grab that next step, right?
And this is how my wife and I have recently done this. And she came up with this phrase, but our goals are in pen, but our path is in pencil. And so we know what we're going after, but it changes every single day. So we erase, draw a new line, erase, maybe draw a new line.
I love it. I love it. You never know. And then that's what I think we're in a really good pivot point, because then you go to Naval X and you're at Naval X and you're working for the gentleman that did the videos. And I'm terrible with names.
Secretary Gertz.
Yes. You're working for him and he's amazing. And things are going good there in DC at the Pentagon. And then you go, I think I'm going to branch on my own. How did that happen?
Yeah. So again, I fell. I say I fell, but I didn't fall. I chose that path of going into the kind of the media PAO type things. And I never wanted to be a PAO because I don't agree with the way PAOs are told to do their jobs. And so in a government role, I was called the chief marketing officer, which had so much problems. So many people were like, no, we don't do marketing in the government. Like, we're not selling anything. And it's like, you don't understand what I'm trying to do. And it fell into me doing all the videos. That's how Mohawk Matt was kind of created all at the same time, or that same timeline. And so one of the things that before I skip to why I left is one of the things that made me stand out. And again, for those DINFO students, if they're listening to this later, because you make it part of the curriculum, that would be hilarious. Is the piece of I was trying to get people's attention, not the same way everybody else was. And this speaks to everything I do now. I mean, I had a Mohawk in the Pentagon. And so I started I took Instagram and TikTok strategies and applied them to LinkedIn and to the government PAO space and the media space, in the sense of, in a year and a half, it was about a year and 3 quarters of when I started the strategy, I released 563 videos, in which, yeah, that's in military terms. Military commands really release like 9 a day or 9 a year, maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
And they're going to be like the today here in the Navy. Thank you, sailors. Great job. Super
They're all the
formal,
same.
written by
Except for the
you.
company commanding officer. He's got his own personal Instagram. I'll have to show it to you later. It's amazing.
That's awesome.
Or not personal, but it's official CO Instagram. It's I've never seen anything like it. So
that's awesome. And so I just started doing the video path, and it got me into all these different conversations with all these different people, and admirals and generals and high ups and low downs, and at every level of the military and the civilian service across Navy, the Marine Corps, and other services. And that put me on a path to, as Naval X was all rotation based. So it was for me, it was a 2-year rotation for most of 6 months or a year. And so as that was coming to a close, my command had kind of wanted to put me back in China Lake, California, or some other organizations had offered me things inside the government. But at the time, I knew that I had the most freedom I was ever going to have in the government. I wasn't going to go back into a cubicle. That just wasn't going to happen. And so we're like, let's make some moves. Let's change. And we kind of talked about leaving, but we didn't leave. We left very quickly we had no clue. I did not have a job lined up, but the reason we left so fast was because my partnership with the NASCAR team, which you know about, is kind of came at that same timing. And it came as an opportunity to be the face of the campaign that they wanted to do. But at the time, I was kind of the face of naval innovation and tech innovation in the civil sector, and so there would have been a conflict of interest. And so I was like, when this opportunity came, we were up in Michigan, and this opportunity came, and I was like, I turned to my wife, I was like, for this to work, this race was in 2 weeks. I was like, I got to put my 2 weeks in on Monday, and she's like, and so we kind of mapped it out and looked at financially what we could do, and took a huge risk. And we're still, like, people think now, like, oh, you're so successful.
You're so successful. It's all perfect.
Let me show you my things.
Yeah, you're taking a risk.
Yeah, so that was why we jumped so quickly. But it was the main reasons were part of that path of like, I'm starting to get too uncomfortable. I want to make change in different ways. I want to be able to impact people the way I want to, not just the way an organization wants to. And it's not just the government. Any big organization does this. It's just hard to do that and be that kind of person that moves around. Like someone said to me about a year ago, but about six to 8 months before I had left the government, they said, oh, so after Naval X, your next step, like, I think it'd be awesome if you went into being a program manager. And I was like, you have got to be kidding me. If that's the path, I am gone. Like, I do not want to be, because a program manager just means you just sit there and read documents and pay proposals. Like, nope, I'm out.
Yeah, I think you just knew that like life was ready to take you in a different direction. And Vicky, I'm sorry, I'm seeing all your comments, but I'm involved in just listening so much. So let me see. Some of them I don't think I'm going to be able to get through, but I definitely wanted to get through this one right here. It says, Matt, you're an amazing mentor for both service and non-service people. And then she said towards the end, and I'll answer the other comments later. She says, I retired from a 30-year state job in September, and I did it to save my soul. Yes. And I think when you know, when it's time to go, it's time to go. And so tell us a little bit about what life has been like since all these changes. I see the race car stuff. Tell me a little bit about some of the other ventures.
So to your question, what life's been like, it's actually been healthier. I realized this 3 weeks ago at a conference, someone I hadn't seen since I was in, or in the service or in the Navy. And so she was like, you seem like better and healthier. How's all your kidney stone and mental and all your physical health? I was like, oh shoot, it's gone.
Wow.
And so like physically I was in such, and I'll use the word carefully, but I think it matters, toxic because you're like forced to work so much. You're forced, but like at least where I was, like you have to do this, you have to do that, and I was burning myself out, and the negative of this or that, all these things over just more than when I left, but even over the last few years of doing it this way, being put in a box was toxic for me. Maybe not for everyone, but it was for me.
Mhm.
And so that affected my physical health, but I didn't realize it until last 2 weeks ago, 8 months after I got out, and I haven't had all the issues I had. I was like, oh shoot, look at that. So physically and mentally, I'm much healthier. But job wise, so career wise, we got out, and I had 2 or 3 things lined up. They all failed. They did not. They did not work out.
Right.
And I'm glad now, because now I see where they are, and I'm like, oh, that would have sucked.
Yeah.
But at the time, it was hard. It was like, what the heck? What's going on? I had this plan, and so as that, we're like, well, we need income, and so we just started our own business. And my wife had already been freelancing for years for her company that she created, and so she was more familiar with that than I was. So we just started finding work, and at first it started out with consulting, and like consulting in the sense of government to industry and industry to government, like, because I had that brain from acquisitions. I knew how the path to put people down to find government contracts are enough. And so I started some of that. Then I did some freelance agile coaching, some freelance human-centered design, like design sessions to get teams and people thinking differently and planning. That's the story I told earlier about the Space Combat 2040. That was one of those. And then it became, and so as we're building this company out, we're like, okay, we're doing this, because my T-shaped brain of like, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. I had all these things we offer. And as I spoke about them, it was just like, bleh. It was just like, nobody cared that I could do anything. And so it was
Right.
like, okay. I was talking to a friend, and he asked, hey, do you offer this service? I was like, I don't offer that service, but I know how to do that service. So yes. And so
Love it.
now, and then within like 72, 96 hours, it was like, I had like 5 people ask me that same question. I was like, oh, maybe this is what we're supposed to be doing. And so that's where it became Denlin Group, which is our branding company. I use the word marketing. We're more branding heavy than marketing, because marketing is what you say about yourself. Branding is what people say when you leave the room. And I'm more on that reputation, credibility building. That's what I want to help people do. And so we now have branding clients, both companies, individuals. We just landed another one that we're doing some partnerships with. And so as we were building all that out, it was as we took this big jump and this risk, like, we put everything on the line. We've been living off of some of our savings and then some credit cards that we took out for the business. And then as we're building that out, other things started to come in play. And so I sound calm now, but there was times as a brand new entrepreneur, I was throwing up multiple times a week. I was nauseous every day. You have the highs and the lows. If you don't know entrepreneurship, it's not the easiest thing in the world. It's probably one of the hardest things in the world. It proves that we're all crazy. But I
You're so
knew.
young, Matt. You're so much younger than me, and you don't have, like, Vicky here, she's got a 30-year state job. I'm going to have, if I get out at 28, I'm going to have a 28-year career as an 05. I'm not taking on the risk that you took on by any means. And so you are really an inspiration for a lot of people, because people, I'm guessing, I mean, I don't know. I'm not embarrassed about my age. I'm 45. But I'm guessing.
37.
Okay, yeah, you're you're actually older than I thought. I honestly, Matt, I thought you were like early 30s.
Yes, I am. I'm 31, 100%.
But you also don't have the retirement to fall back on like I did. I know you're medically
No,
retired, but it's not the same. It's not the same
it's not
benefits
much.
at all. And so, for you to do what you did and to let life guide you the way that you have, you are an inspiration for so many people. I hope you know that. I hope you know that.
Let is a strong word. Life guided me. But I like how you said it, because as this transition happened last year, we were going through some of the worst things personally that we've had, both in our life, um, and then also, thank you, and then also with my wife's mom, who I've talked about online before, last fall, and so we were going through all of these things. Most people in their life, they make a life change, and in their entire life, they'll like move, they'll have kids, they'll lose a family member, they'll change jobs. We had all of those things in 6 months. And
Wow.
so it was the hardest thing. And eventually, we'll say it was the most rewarding thing, but we're still in it right now.
Right, you are.
But
You're still in the fight.
oh yeah, every single day.
You're still in the hustle and in the grind.
And so, but I like how you said it, because it was the more I tried to micromanage what we wanted to do, like, hey, this is the path, this is the less it worked out. And so we just started saying yes to every conversation, kind of like the movie Yes Man. We don't say yes to everything we do, but we say yes to every conversation. And without that mentality, I wouldn't be where I'm sitting now, and like literally sitting in Hawaii for work. Um, and so, but it was yes to every conversation, because at first, when I first transitioned, I was like, that's not what I want to do. I'm not even going to entertain it, or that, but not realizing what that could maybe lead to. And that's where things have gone, is so, and that's why I put my phone number out there so publicly, is because I don't know who's going to call me. Like, I had a lady call me a month ago, who's just like, I saw your phone number and nobody does that, and I'm surprised you answered. This is so cool. And I don't always answer if I'm busy, but I always try to at least respond eventually. And she happened to catch me driving, so I answered. But now, a month, 5, 6 weeks later, we're in talks of doing work for them,
That's
and
so cool.
and partnering on stuff. And so it's just finding, being open to the universe and to the world of like, sure, let's see how that goes.
I
And
love
it's
it.
gonna, some of them, like, in my brain, I start and kill about 10 businesses a week, because I'm like, oh, yeah, we could do this, and then this or that, or services or things. And then I tried multiple things. Like, I'm on my I'm on my fourth or third public podcast, but it's my new one, Hair, Land, and Sea, is actually, and it's by Hair, Land, and Sea, in case you heard it wrong, with an H. But that's like the fifth iteration of that one. I just finally solidified that. And so it's just finding that path and taking that jump. And it's scary. It is the scariest thing in the world. And it is every single day. But the value and the freedom to say no to clients, the freedom to try this, not try that, to try that, is just, that's what has made it come back. Even the stress financially and the business building and all the things and the strain it takes, it's that freedom to be able to do what we want to do when we want to do it. And that freedom doesn't always mean we get to spend money, but we can breathe. I can sleep. And so it's just that was such a powerful thing that I never had. And
I love it.
so I'll pause there.
No, I was just gonna say that you reminded me too of Amanda Huffman. So she's the Woman in the Military podcast host and blogger and writer. When she started her podcast, she thought that she was going to be like a mommy blogger, and she was going to write about motherhood and family, and that's what she thought. But she saw that anytime she wrote about her military service, or anytime she would tell something about what happened when she was deployed to Afghanistan, she just saw how it would resonate with people. And,
Well,
go ahead.
I was gonna say that's how I started talking about so much of my dyslexia and ADHD, and the way my brain works differently, is because I just started doing it a couple years ago. And the first ADHD post I ever made was a Swiss Army knife, and it was talked about just how all the different pieces, and I did it because I was just sharing who I was, but then like that got so much resonation with so many people. And that I actually got a phone call from who's now a 2-star general, whom I won't share, but they sent me a message and they gave me their number, and I talked to this person, and they had never, similar to the talks I've had with you.
Yeah,
They,
you and I had to talk about it before I was ready to come public with it.
Yeah, they had never seen anyone in the military or professionally acknowledge it, and it had been a really hard thing for that person, and even things we've talked about. And so it was those that started to resonate, like, oh, like me just being me and sharing me allows other people to be themselves and learn from my story. I get a lot very often, or very commonly, people think it's everything I do is about ego. And if you pay attention to everything I do, it's rarely about me. I use me as the story, and through my experiences, but all the interviews I've done, like I rarely talk about my own path unless it's to tell a story, unless it's to learn from.
Right.
Um, and so it's always for me about helping others find that story, that journey. And so that came from an adult professionally. So I started sharing more and more about it, dyslexia, different things. Every now and then I'll share more. But it really hit me. And helping adults, sure, it's great, it's powerful. But really what hit me was with kids. And I got I got this video from this kid who was 6 at the time. He said, "Hey, Mohawk man, I haven't seen your video yet today, and I'm going to school. Can you post it before I go? Otherwise, I can't watch it." And it was during COVID when I was posting every single day, in the mornings. And I built this big kid audience because they were watching their parents' phones, or they could hear it in the same room. So I wasn't targeting children, and I wasn't like going down that path of helping youth. I mean, I had in different ways, but then as that grew, I got a Facebook message from this mom who I made a video a couple years ago that talked about me being bullied and turned upside down in the common area of our school. And everyone at the time, I was like, oh yeah, like, haha, my friends are being my friends, but I didn't realize later they weren't really my friends. And how that affected me in my life at that time. And that video was watched by this family. And then a couple weeks later, the kid had approached his mom, talking about how that's how he feels, and he didn't know that was other people felt that. And so for me, like I lost it. I bawled when that came in. And so it was stories like that's the metric I care about. I don't care about views. I don't care about shares. I don't care about I know that somebody's out there, and there's people there's people out there that are learning from me that I'll never know and never meet. And I, just like I've learned from others from YouTube videos or podcasts or things that I'll never know or meet, and they'll never know me. And so I just keep finding a way to share myself because I know it helps others. And I encourage others to do that because you never know and there's going to be people that learn from you, Teresa, that can't learn from me just because of our experiences. And that's why I love the journey you've created and the path to see you grow because, and somebody actually asked me about you. They said, like, she's getting more attention than you. It's like, I don't give a shit. Like, I think that's awesome. Like, go for it. Freaking, she's reaching people I can't reach, and I'm reaching people you can't reach. And that's why people like us, or people that want to share their story, should, because there's somebody out there that can learn from it.
Oh my God, yes, absolutely. And I think that I get the same feedback that you do about how it's all about me and my ego and all these things sometimes. And really, I get a little frustrated but I don't think it has anything to do with me. I think it has something to do with the fact that they would like to be as expressive and as themselves as I am online. And they just don't feel that this is the right place to do it because they don't trust the universe or they don't trust people or whatever, or they just don't want to open themselves up like that. And I think that this has been so amazing and such a wonderful opportunity for me to be able to help other people and show that you can be your full self online, and you can share stories that are not always great, and you can always sometimes have bad days on the internet, and talk about your bad days. I just feel that it's so important for us to share our stories, our triumphs, but then as well as our failures. And then times that we needed to be held accountable for things. I'm very honest about some of my leadership failures and some of the ways in which I probably wasn't my best self. And I think it's important to have those stories as well. And you have just inspired me so much. And Vicky, says here, thanks. Here, I'll pull it again. My mouse is always giving me trouble. But right here, she says, thanks for allowing a non-service woman to learn from both of you. You're both motivated. And she says,
Thank you.
treatment like that from others has nothing to do with you, it has everything to do with their insecurities. And I believe that as well. And so I just keep on keeping on. And as I deepen into doing this, I just enjoy it. And I'm so honored that people like yourself agree to come on my show. And I'll just keep doing it as long as I can. We're wrapping up towards the end of the show. Is there any closing advice you have for somebody who wants to follow their passions? Anything that you could say? Now you've been doing this, you've been really deepening into it for 8 months. What is your closing advice?
So I will modify that statement into I've been following my deep passion for the last 3 years finally, and that was what I fell into without realizing that I was doing that media and that yearn for that storytelling that I'd missed, but I didn't know I had still. And so the advice I share is so I recently have stopped calling it failing and started calling it falling, because true failure is when you don't get back up. I reference it a lot to like babies. We don't yell at and scorn and judge a child who's trying to walk for the first time, but sure as hell do we do it to adults. Sure, like
Yeah, that's interesting. I never thought of that.
yeah, like you celebrate and like keep going, do it again.
Keep going. You got it. You got it.
You take videos and you post it on your social media, the whole world, the first steps they took.
Yeah.
But as an entrepreneur, it's like, this isn't going to work. You should stop now. Someone told me before I left the government, you only got like 16 years left before retirement. 16 years. Like, and it's no fault of theirs. It's just what they know. But
Right.
it's the encouragement level for the entrepreneur world. Like I know someone that makes this comment a lot. One of my mentors, for entrepreneurs, we should start having baby showers. I think it's Elon Musk is one of them too. We should start having baby showers like we do for new moms. Entrepreneur showers, like, oh, here's your tax filing, here's your LLC payment, here's a branding guy for you, like, because it's such a scary unknown world. So the best thing I can say is start, like, and if you can start not the way I did, start like by having a little security, so you can have that thing, like, or burn the boats. I burned the boats, and we took every risk that we could, and we do still every day. And I have the entrepreneur side, and I do have, you probably recently saw, I have the Catalyst campus work I'm doing for an actual company.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's still more like a client to me in my mind, and that's but so just start. You don't know where it's going to go. Say yes to every conversation. That doesn't mean say yes to everything, but say yes to every conversation, because you don't know. There was a conversation I almost said no to, and that would have cost me a 6-figure client, because it wasn't something I did. But that conversation led me to another one, and so you never know where it's going to go. Just try the battleship strategy. It's not always going to work. You're going to miss a lot of shots, but the ones you make could be awesome.
I love it, Matt. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Oh, one more. Okay.
And I have to say, continue to be awesome and be the reason someone else has an awesome day.
I love it. Yep. That's your tagline. Well, thank you. Where can people find you for the ones who are listening on the audio?
Yeah, so you can find me on every social media platform at Mohawk Matt Denny or at Mohawk Matt Denny. You can also find me at MohawkMattDenny.com. But the one I use the most is LinkedIn. But you can find me Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook. I'm everywhere at Mohawk Matt Denny. You can even Venmo me there too. So thanks for the help.
Awesome. Well, Thank you so much for those of you who are watching, chatting in the comments. Vicki, I'll get to some of your comments a little bit later. I know they're on Facebook, but thank you so much for everyone watching. And we'll catch you guys again. I'll meet you backstage here in just a moment, Matt. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of your evening. It was a pleasure to have a chance to catch up with you guys again. Hopefully I'll be doing another podcast next week. All right. I'll catch you all later. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Oh, and happy Easter. Take care.